Ladies and gentlemen, today I'd like to talk to you about what we can do to look after our mental well-being during the pandemic. 2020 has been a very difficult year for all of us. Coronavirus has affected every aspect of our lives without exception, from the simplest things like going outdoors to, for example, a treatment being postponed during because of coronavirus. Um, it also has made us realize how much for granted we've been taking different things like meeting friends and family or um, going on holiday. There's no exception. Everyone has been affected in one way or another. Um, During lockdown, people were obviously stuck indoors. Some of us probably in tiny flats without an access to a garden. Some of us with little children, again, being stuck indoors without being able to go out and for the children to release the energy that they naturally have. Across the globe, people's mental health has been affected. I've suffered from depression and anxiety a few times before, and I can tell you that it's not pleasant. So, here are a few tips which helped me overcome these problems. Tip number one: when I first suffered with depression and anxiety, there wasn't that much awareness of these conditions. I felt I couldn't talk to anyone because maybe they would think I was going crazy or they just wouldn't understand me. Luckily, I started doing some research on the internet, and I can tell you that knowledge is power. This made me understand what I was going through and realize that I wasn't the only one, and most importantly, that I wasn't going crazy, that I was ill. Tip number two: I found it really helpful to occupy my brain with something when I was feeling anxious, for example. This stopped my brain from thinking these repetitive and intrusive thoughts. So maybe getting a new hobby or reading a book, cooking a nice meal, or even just tidying up could help you. Anything to get yourself busy. Number three: talk to family and friends about your problem. I was lucky in a way because my cousin, who I'm really close to, has or was going through the exactly the same thing, and talking to her really helped me. She understood me completely, um, and what's even more important, I could talk to her openly about depression and anxiety, and getting these problems off my chest really helped me a lot. So, talk to your friends and family. Tip number four: another way to boost our mood and help our mental health is to exercise. I know it probably sounds like a cliche, but it really does help. During exercise, our brain releases the so called endorphins into our body. They are hormones which relieve stress and also pain. I know that when you're depressed, maybe exercise is the last thing on your mind. But once you get yourself motivated and get through this initial obstacle of not being able to do it for whatever reason, it gets easier, and believe me, it's worth it. You don't need to join a fancy gym. You can just go for a walk or a jog or a cycle, just whatever you fancy. Exercising is a great way to relieve some anxiety and some stress. Tip number five: last but not least, if you feel like you can't cope anymore and that your mental health is really suffering, ask for professional help. I guess your first port of call could be your GP, who can give you some information about what organizations you can contact and what relevant services you can access. And you may say, yes, now the waiting lists are really long, especially in the current climate. Um, and going private might be really expensive. Yes, you are right, the waiting lists are really long. Um, but even if you decide to access some services outside of the NHS, it doesn't need to cost an arm and a leg. There are some organizations, some charities that ask you to make a contribution rather than pay a full fee. Um, it is really important to look after your mental health and get professional help if things get out of control. To conclude, mental health is very important to our well-being and happiness. It is crucial to look after it just like we look after our physical health. There's a lot of stigma attached to mental health disorders. That's why it's important to raise awareness about these issues, especially when it is estimated that 1 in every 4 people will be affected by some kind of a mental health disorder at some point of their life. So, from my experience, the best way to deal with mental health problems is to openly talk about them, to ask for professional help, get active, and keep busy. It worked for me, and I hope it works for you. Thank you very much.